Hello and welcome back to Theatre Beard, the YouTube channel specifically for students of drama, theatre and performance studies or the performing arts. And this is our very first industry interview. I've been lucky enough to interview Sam Rabone, who's a professional pantomime dame and panto director, and you're going to get to see the results of that interview now. It is quite a lengthy interview at about 30 minutes, so I am going to put timestamps in the description box. So if you want to jump to a particular section, you can find the one that's most relevant to you. Before we jump into the video though, obviously don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. Enjoy. So welcome to Theatre Beard, Sam Rabone, panto dame and director. Thank you so much for joining us, Sam.
Well, it's nice to do something in lockdown, isn't it? It's just nice to be out. Well, I'm in the house, but I've moved rooms.
You're digitally somewhere else.
I've moved rooms and I feel like I said, I'll make it look a bit nicer, but now I feel like I'm in something from Phoenix Nights.
Looks like some kind of 80s game show, but I'm here for it. I'm enjoying it.
Might get some viewers in. They'll go, what is that video? And then they'll realise what it is and stay.
Yes, absolutely, because we're going to be talking about all things panto. And so I imagine everybody who's watching this video has probably been to a panto, because for a lot of people it's their first introduction to live theatre, usually as a very small child. But if there are people who aren't aware of what panto is, could you talk a little bit about what characterises pantomime performances and how they're different from maybe a play or, say, like a Western musical?
Well, I think firstly, it's a truly uniquely British thing, which I think says a lot about our style of theatre. So it's very truly uniquely British. It happens in a few other countries around the world, but mainly only in England. There's a couple that happen in South Africa. There's a couple that happen in Canada. Where else have I seen them happen? Sydney gets them, but it's a British thing and it's exported to there a lot of the time. So a pantomime is a musical comedy theatre experience. Well, it's a theatre experience of a fairy tale with music, comedy, slapstick and audience participation. If the fourth wall is not broken, it probably won't be a pantomime. A pantomime has to have the fourth wall broken for it to be a pantomime. Otherwise, it's Pinter, and that's very, very different.
Absolutely. But yeah, so that's a really important feature, is the fact that the fourth wall's completely removed, and I suppose it's so interactive that it's the audience are probably as much as the performers the actors are.
The fourth wall is removed completely, but there's rules around the fourth wall being broken. We spend a lot of time going over who can break the fourth wall. Most people will break the fourth wall at some point in the pantomime. Like the principal girl will often say hello in her introduction to the boys and girls. So she'll often say hello, but from then on, she will very, very, very rarely break the fourth wall. Right. The people that are allowed to are the dame, the comic, the villain, sometimes the fairy, but even the fairy, really, she's there to see over the story rather than tell the audience what's going on. So there's three people really who are allowed to break that fourth wall. If everybody's breaking it all the time, it gets a bit samey. So we try and make it very, very strict as to who can break the fourth wall. And I guess our viewers will know what the fourth wall is.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully if they've seen other Theatre Beard videos, they should be very well versed in that, because I've done videos on Brecht, Stanislavski, and also the kind of architecture of a proscenium march theatre. So that's all in there. Brilliant. So you are a panto dame and more recently director. How long have you been involved in panto?
Professionally since 2009. So my first professional pantomime was in 2009 for a company called Pantone, David Lee. And I went in, I'm very unusual that my first pro theatre job and my first pantomime, same thing, were as a dame. Most people start as something else and work their way up to dame, starts as a comic. A lot of comics change to dame, and it's sort of known as the comic menopause when they've sort of outgrown I mean, some comics still like to wear the baseball hat, and it's like, you're just hiding a bald patch, aren't you, mate? Like, get rid of that baseball cap. You're not fooling anybody. And they go through the change and become a dame. Whereas I went in as a career. I've been a career dame, basically. I've only ever played a man once in pantomime, which was 2 years ago in Cinderella when I played Buttons. So yeah, I've been a career dame since 2009.
Fantastic. And as part of being a dame, can we talk a little bit about the costuming? So obviously, like, there's a whole range of costumes that you whip out, but there are specific costumes for specific shows. But are they made for you, or are they made for the production? Are they made for you as a dame, if that makes sense?
So when I first started, all my costumes were mine, made for me by my costume maker. So everything was mine. But then when I became resident at Lichfield, it becomes very, very difficult unless you've got a very high budget to costume a show. If you think a dame could be doing anywhere between, depending upon the production, between 9 and 15 costume changes, if the dame is having to do 15 costume changes, and you're setting aside around about £1,000 minimum per full costume from foot to head. So because if you're changing your shoes, you're changing your tights, you're changing your dress, you're changing your wig. £1,000 is probably a minimum price for a costume. It could be £15,000 budget just to costume the dame.
Wow.
So when you become resident somewhere, it becomes very, very difficult to costume yourself constantly. So I've got a stack of dresses I can use, but the company I work for, Evolution, I go down and do a fitting with them normally around now, depending upon whether I've been cast or not.
So if you were a kind of freelance dame that goes to different productions, would that individual actor have a set of costumes themselves that they can say, well, I've got this, we could use this?
Yes. So when I first started, I had a range of costumes which I thought that'll work there. So no matter what I was casting, I had a sort of what we call workers, which I could either add an apron to, or a different wig, or add some shoulder, sort of Chinese shoulders to. So they were workable into many different scenarios. Whereas now all my dresses are very, very sort of specific to one show.
Brilliant. And recently you've become a panto director for the show at Lichfield Garrick. Obviously it's not just down to the director to mount the whole production, there's a whole team of people that are involved. So can you talk a little bit about who you collaborate with on mounting a production of a pantomime?
Yeah, so Lichfield's slightly different to a lot of the other venues I've worked at because it's a co-production. But if I give more of an umbrella of how Evolution normally work, I think that will probably help. So Evolution, the production company, they have the scripts, the costumes, the set, and lots of contacts for lots of different people, actors, dancers, choreographers, lighting designers, sound designers. They have those people. Lichfield's slightly different because we work with the theatre management as well. So Evolution supply a lot of the stuff, but then the theatre also do bits and bobs. So once we know the topic, which we normally know before we start. So say when we were doing Cinderella, before we started rehearsals, we already knew what the following year should have been, but COVID happened, so Peter Pan didn't go on, but we knew that we were going to do Peter Pan. So then once the show comes down in January, they get all the sets back and they decide which set will go to which production. If there's only one Peter Pan going out, they can put bits and different things in, or they have to look at the size of the venue and decide which set will fit in the venue. So we know what the production is, we know what the set's going to be, and then it's this casting. The casting will probably come next. So Evolution will give suggestions. Often they'll talk to me as the director and say, have you worked with this person? Would you like to work with this person? Have you got any suggestions for who you think could play these parts? So that starts the talking process. So we'll get the principals cast first, which are normally either between 5 and 7 of us on stage. Dancers come a lot later. Dancers are normally not until about September because of cruise contracts and things. They often get, if you cast a dancer in March, a lot of the time they might have been offered a 6-month cruise contract or a West End job and you lose them. So we tend to wait until September. They'll have come back from cruises and then we cast from there. Once we've done the principal casting, while that's going on, if we haven't already got an MD in musical director in place from either a previous year or we're changing for every reason, we've got to line up an MD. And then once I've met the MD and we've read an old version of the script, we talk, me and the MD, about what songs we would like, whether there's any from the previous script we like and want to use, or if there's a new opening song that we've heard. So when we did Cinderella, I'd recently listened to the whole soundtrack of Waitresses and I'd heard Opening Up, And I said, I really think this song would work in Lichfield. I don't know why I was really passionate about it. And so we talk to the MD and we get those, and then he starts doing tracks as to how he thinks they should change and what the music should be. So we get the creative script and songs done way in advance. Hopefully that's done by August time. Wow. Choreographer, I've worked with the same choreographer now for a few years, Simon Barnum. If you Google him, he's a very good man. He tends to listen to the music a few weeks in advance because once he knows who his dancers are, he can then start working on the choreography he wants to use and how many kids we've got. The kids are a big thing, so we try and cast as good as dancers, because we don't want the kids just, a lot of the pantomimes you see, kids just sat at the back clicking their fingers or doing box steps. And if we got kids that can dance, we want to make them dance. So then me and Simon would talk. Basically, if Simon's got ideas, he goes and runs with them, but then he'll come to me and says, is there anything specific that you need to happen in this song? So going back to opening it up in Cinderella, I said that we're going to have to build a box, a box which is 4 by 5 high. They're big boxes, and then they'll spin round halfway through the song, and my face will appear. And he's going, "Are you joking?" I'm going, "No, that's what's going to happen." Then the music will stop, and I'll burst through the boxes. He's going, "So during the song, I've got to choreograph a building of a brick wall." Yes, and so he has to then deal with my ideas like that. Brilliant. So yeah, then when we get into the studio to start rehearsing, he's my eyes when I'm on stage. So if I can't see what the overall picture is like, he's good at an overall picture. So he watches for like things that don't quite work or don't quite look right.
Yeah, I think one of the questions somebody asked on the YouTube comment section was that, is there any conflict when you're both being in a performance and directing it as well? And I think you've covered some of that with having this outside eye, this outside presence to look at the overall picture on stage. But are there any other difficulties that you encounter at all?
Well, I was trying to think of ways to describe how my brain works with this. I think I came up with Gordon Ramsay as my reference for you. And the reason I came up with Gordon Ramsay as my reference was because he can cook, but he can also tell you how to cook while he's cooking. He's not just focusing on the cooking, he's able to do the two things at the same time. He's able to either present a show and cook, or tell the people the potatoes need to go in while he's doing the steak. And because he knows how to cook, because I spent 15 years with Panto, I know what Panto needs to do. Panto is very, very specific. It's evolving and changing, and as long as we can keep up with that, but I'll have looked at those things throughout the year as to what I think we need to do. But the body of Panto is the same. So I know what Panto is because I've studied it for so long. So I feel confident enough that if I'm stood on stage, I know what's going on around me and what should be going on around me. But yeah, I also thank technology. So I have my eyes out the front with Simon. An amazing DSM in Dr. Cattell, the only doctor of stage management in the country.
Can you tell us what a DSM is?
I can tell you what a DSM is. So the hierarchy of stage management is stage manager, DSM deputy stage manager, and then ASM, often 2 ASMs. So you'll have 2 assistant stage managers. And the stage managers, if you've worked and done a lot of Amdram work, it's a very different system with stage management and crew. In the professional world, a stage manager is pretty much there to keep actors happy. They're there to make sure we don't have breakdowns. A DSM controls everything, the show, the lights, the sound, everything that moves. The DSM is there for telling us when to leave the dressing room. The DSM does that. She calls us, or he calls us over a tannoy and gives us warnings as to what's going on from the half-hour call up until beginners. If you're not a beginner, you'll get a call during the show telling you when to get to the stage. And so all the fly cues that happen, the DSM tells the crew when to do it. The crew will not move until the DSM calls those changes. Every lighting change you see, literally every lighting change you see, the DSM will call. So in a pantomime, they'll often have around about 550 lighting cues, if not more. Sound cues, they could be up into the hundreds of sound cues as well. And so they follow the script there on everything. ASM's assistant stage managers are looking after our props, and us. And then the crew are there to move the stage, the set, set things for us and things. But yeah, the stage management team are part of sort of the company of actors. So I have an amazing DSM in Tracy. During a rehearsal process, she maps out every direction I give to an actor. So if I tell Cinderella to enter stage right and stand center stage, and then on this line to move, Tracy, in her prompt copy of the book that she reads all the cues from, will annotate it up until dress rehearsal. It's annotated with diagrams of us moving around. So we know when I've asked somebody to move, we know where they should have moved to through little circles. She'll draw like a little circle with a scene and an arrow and annotate it on the script. And the reason I said technology is because I can film it. So I can film a rehearsal, watch it back in the evening and go, that didn't work, that works. And so the two people in the room and technology.
So we know that there's an awful lot that goes into mounting a production, but how on earth do you kind of prioritize when you start your rehearsal process? Is there a particular order that things go in? Like, do you start with the songs first, learning the songs, then learn the dances, or does it all happen simultaneously? Wow. So it is a lot of things happening simultaneously just to make sure that, I suppose, that everyone's busy and also maximising the amount of time that you've got.
Yeah, if people are in, I want to keep them busy. Yeah. If they don't need to be in, I'm much of the mindset that if you don't need to be in, go and learn your lines somewhere else. There's no point you sitting in a rehearsal room. If I'm sat in a rehearsal room, I'm distracted. I'll end up watching the dancing and go, I wish I could dance like that. Whereas if I know I'm sat at home, I'll learn my lines.
So that's all the logistics of kind of rehearsals, with learning the choreography, learning the songs, and learning all the scenes and the comedy routines. At what point does kind of the set start to be built? Because I'm guessing there might be sections of scenery that you need to work with if it's a particular routine, for example, like a comedy routine. But are there things added across that rehearsal period while you're rehearsing in a studio, perhaps?
Yeah, because we're not a rep company. So if you were working, say, at the Birmingham Rep, the set will be being made, generally speaking, while you're rehearsing, and you'd get it when you go into tech. You might be able to get some specialised props and things for that. But because we're working for a pantomime company that pretty much most of the time everything's already in place for, unless it's a very specialised up to, like there's a new thing happening that year where we've got to get that made. It's there. So a lot of the time, first day of rehearsal, we get one truckload. So normally one will arrive on the first day. They'll have all our costumes in and a lot of the working props. The costumes arrive early enough that if somebody's either lost weight, put on weight, or gave the wrong sizes, never done that, there's time enough to alter the costumes or get another one sent or do whatever we need to do. And they send the workable props. So if we've got like a prop bench that has got like a missing leg or something that tips people up, like happened in Sleeping Beauty. So those working props will turn, or working pieces of furniture will turn up for us. So working furniture, working props will turn up. Set will arrive. So in Lichfield, because we've got an extra week, the set normally arrives at the start of the second week, which gives the crew a week to build it from the Monday. until the Sunday when we normally start the tech process. So they've got sort of a week to build the set. But while the set's being built, a lighting designer will come in. Normally will light probably late afternoon into the evening. So the set's being done in the day, then the light's being done in the evening. A sound designer will go in the morning, so sound will be happening and being designed in the morning, so it doesn't cross over with the lighting. So while people are trying, because the lighting designer will normally work with a light programmer who will need to talk to crew who are going to move lights if they're not on moving head. So if you're doing sound while that's going on, you've got to make sure the sound happens at one time and lights happen at another time. And then we're allowed onto the stage when all of it is safe. Until that point, we don't go near it. It takes them nearly a week to build it, really. And if anybody ever saw the Sleeping Beauty Crazy Bathroom, that turns up and we've got one day. And I say one day, we've got 1 3-hour session to tech it before the tech. And then we have to tech it properly in the tech. So it's not long. We don't have time. If you're on a lot of the theatre schedules, you've got 5 days to learn the show and then 5 days to tech and dress it before you open. It's bonkers. So you have to go in prepared, learn your lines, or have a rough idea of them. A lot of people learn in situ, so it's learning on the go. But the sooner you can get off book, the better. So if you can get off book, but if you need it, I'd rather have you doing it. So especially when we're trying to do runs to time, if you need the book, have it, because I need to know is the act an hour or is it an hour and a half? And if we're all stood there going line, we have no idea how long it's going to be. So I'd rather have the books in place until you're confident enough to put the book down.
Exactly. You mentioned about the Crazy Bathroom, which is this incredible piece of set with, is it called a slosh routine? Is that right?
I call it a slosh routine.
And what is a slosh routine?
Slosh routine is very clown orientated. It can involve either mess of some description, I will say, because I was going to say it doesn't have to involve one form of mess. So it could be a dry slosh routine, which is like a baking scene. So people might get flour in their face. Don't like those. Once you've got flour in your face, you're buggered for the rest of the show. Yeah. Slosh could be a custard pie routine. It could be water. It could be flour. It's messy. It's chaos. It's carnage. And it's the most fun you'll have on stage ever. And there's a lot of actors now who don't want to do it because they don't want to get messy. They don't want to do the slosh. But for me, it's quintessential panto. It's joyful to do. And when it's done right, when you throw yourself into it and not care, it's amazing.
So when it comes to those routines, how do you begin to put them together? Because obviously you've just said it is chaotic and slapstick. So is there an element that it's rehearsed and an element that it's improvised, or do you just go?
I don't want to give too much away, but the bathroom scene was it had to be quite scripted to a point, because if you didn't stand in a certain spot, you wouldn't get a jet of water in the face. So the bathroom scene was quite choreographed. But what I like to do, and if I work with people that enjoy slosh as much as I do, what I like to do is have enough set that we know where we can get laughs and what's funny, but then enough where we can be free, and if one of us falls over, it's fine to go with it. So in the bathroom scene, we used to have a good sort of 20 seconds in the middle where we knew we could play around and have a bit of fun, but we had to be in certain places at certain times. And the way I try and work these routines is that we want to sing the song, we want to get through it, and we want it to happen. The audience get behind you because they can see how frustrated you're getting when you're falling over and can't finish the line because the slosh is winning. Whereas if you want the slosh to win, they can see you're letting the slosh win. When somebody falls over on purpose, you can sense they fall. Whereas a genuine good fall is you're trying to do this. You want to finish the scene, and the more frustrated you get with the fact that you can't finish it, the funnier it gets for everybody involved, because British people like to see frustrated people for some reason. Yeah. We love to see people getting frustrated. People putting a tent up at a festival, watching when you've got your tent up and you're drinking a cider, somebody struggling, you enjoy it because we've all been there. Somebody trying to pull a trolley out of the stand, We enjoy watching. You just got to put a pound in the slot. Put a pound in the slot, and they can't do it. We enjoy seeing frustrated people.
Absolutely. When it comes to costuming, because we mentioned costumes earlier on, and how do you deal with quick changes? Like, are you just left to your own devices? Because you were talking about how when it's a change, there's like the shoes, the tights, the dress, the wig, everything changes. How does that happen?
You form a very strong bond with your costume, your wardrobe mistress. And that bond is, I've got wardrobe mistresses that I've worked with who I just love to pieces because they're there for you. And they're there from once you've done your face, they come, they zip you up and check you're ready to go. And then the rest of their plot is setting you. They very rarely, they'll help other people when they need it. If there's a quick change for a dancer who needs it, dancers seem to be able to quick change themselves, though. I've never understood how they do it so easily, but they've got arms that go down and zip themselves up. And I think it's because I've got extra padding and boobs and things, and I can't zip myself up. But a lot of my changes are under a minute. And so it's under a minute to change shoes, tights. My undergarments are pretty much always the same. So I'll always have my boobs on, made of birdseed, smell of Holland and Barrett, stink. But I like weight. A lot of dames use polystyrene balls like beanbags, and I don't think it gives any weight. Whereas as soon as I got the weight of my boobs on, I stand differently. So I have my boobs and sort of my padded bottom and thighs on, and they stay on unless I'm getting in the bathroom scene. I have to take them off then, but my undergarments will always stay on, so I don't change anything sort of skin wise. But then I try and make a dress as easy to change as possible. So if it can be one zip and I step into it, I don't like over the head dresses. I like to step in, so I'm a stepper.
Right.
So they lay your shoes out, your tights out, you step in it. Some people like their tights to be rolled, some people like them to be left, but you get to know what you like. But they do everything. They're there and they help you. So you walk off, they unzip, you step up, that drops to the floor, you step out, you step into the next one, you get zipped up, the wigs are hard like helmets. You take one wig off, put another wig on, turn around and walk back on.
So we're going to go back to directing now. I've had a question on YouTube, and it was that what would you say are the 3 kind of characteristics or essential skills that you would need to have as a director?
Organization.
I was going to say, I think judging by the things you've talked us through so far, I think that's, definitely high priority.
Organization, more than one brain, a willingness to adapt as well. As if a director is so set in his ways that one thing is going to happen and the actors can't do it, it becomes a block for everybody involved. The actors are going to get frustrated, the director's going to get frustrated. So it's the willingness to listen to your actors, especially in panto. I mean, I'm talking very much from a panto point of view here. Comics will say it a certain way, and you've got to have the willingness to go, yeah, that works or that doesn't work. But then you've also got to be willing to listen. But then I suppose the third one is decisive enough that you've got to make that decision. It's your decision is the final decision. If you've got to cut 5 minutes off the show, you've got to decide what those 5 minutes are that have got to go. If a comic comes up to you and says, I've got this joke I want to put in, you've got to decide whether you think it's funny enough to go into the show or whether you go, no, that's not working, we've got to go back to whatever was there before. Organization, a willingness to listen, but also decisive enough to decide what is going, what isn't going, and putting your foot down at the final thing and going, this is how we're doing it.
Fantastic. Yeah, it just reminded me of, I was part of a project with the National Theatre, and there was a talk from Rufus Norris, who's the artistic director of the National Theatre, and he said that all directing boils down to effectively is making decisions, and that as a director you're the person who makes that choice between, do we stick with this joke or do we put that one in instead? Is this working or do we change it?
The lighting designer, the musical director probably not quite so much, because they're very, very, it's what they're doing. They're there with the music, unless you've got to say, we've got to cut a minute off that track. I mean, a lot of the time you don't tend to clash too much with the MD because you'll have done so much prep with them previously. But yeah, choreography, if you go in, it doesn't work, you've got to tell them. Lights, the LD will have planned everything, and you walk in and you go, oh, don't like that for that. But you've got to say, sound wise, you've got to be able to say, oh, we need to change that needs to be louder. But yeah, you're running the ship, you're the captain, you are the boss. At the end of the day, what you say goes until it opens. Then there's a thing about directors going backstage, and directors should not be. I'm already backstage, so I'm in the show, but I shouldn't be allowed backstage after the half. When the stage manager takes over, the stage manager is then in charge of the show. I shouldn't really be going around and giving notes on the half.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Sam. If people wanted to find out more about you as a performer, how could they do that?
I'm on Facebook as Sam Rabone Pantomime Dame. I mean, please do type the Pantomime Dame one in. I get random requests of normal people finding my personal one. So, I mean, you can try. I won't accept you. It's nice of me to just, I look, I go, no, don't know you. But Sam Rabone Pantomime Dame, you can follow me on that one. Twitter, please, Sam Rabone on Twitter. Instagram, Sam Rabone. It's very easy. Rabone.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much once again for joining me, and I hope to see you on stage this Christmas.
Well, I hope to be on stage before Christmas, because it'd be nice to do something. This chair's very comfy, admittedly, but I do prefer standing and talking.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye, Theatre Beard. You have to wave now at the end of these things.